Good evening, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Sask Sports Show. I'm going to be your host, JD Haughton, and joining me tonight is a friend of mine that actually has helped me a little bit in my broadcasting career, and a broadcaster that I look up to. He is he does the play-by-play for the Kamloops Blazers in the WHL. He is from Saskatchewan, and also he has a very unique goal call. It's Jon Keen, everyone, will be joining me tonight. And Jon and I will be talking about the status of hockey in the WHL in BC and also hockey itself to see how these COVID restrictions have affected, just sports. We're going to talk about his play-by-play career in Kamloops and also in Swift Current. And also we're going to talk about growing up in small town in rural Saskatchewan, how that played a big part in where he is today. So sit back, relax, and enjoy the show. Hey, Jon, how you doing tonight? Thanks for joining me on the show.
Hey, JD, no problem. That was quite the intro here. You got it all covered. So well done.
Well, thank you. Yeah, no, I needed to throw the goal call in there. Just because you do have a very unique and recognizable goal call. But I'm going to start off just kind of how you been. I know it's kind of you're in limbo here waiting for season to start in hockey too, and for you to, the WHL to start. But what have you done to kind of get yourself through, these past 10 months?
Yeah, it's been tough. The last broadcast we had, we were down in Spokane, Washington, and we were pretty aware of COVID-19 because we were in the state of Washington. There was a Tool concert actually in the same building that the Blazers were playing Spokane the next night. So we were aware and taking precautions already, but had I known that was going to be the last broadcast, I didn't really anticipate it. I expected maybe, the games to go on maybe without fans, and here we are now. Almost in December, and still sort of waiting things out. I was actually going to call some U18 action this past weekend involving your former team that you did there, the Thompson Blazers, and they actually postponed all travel for sports teams outside of the community. So those games against a Kelowna-based team were called off. So it's been a bit of a grind, JD, to say the least.
So I've seen that, I know there's been new restrictions added in BC with regarding sports. And I know I've watched you, you're very, I've seen your Twitter and you're very, you're trying to make sense of it. But what exactly has Bonnie Henry implemented regarding sports?
Yeah, so there's been a little bit of confusion, and that's probably what you're alluding to. It sounded like back on Friday that it was going to be the cohorts that were set up. I'm not sure if you're familiar with the cohorts, but I think provinces are quite similar where, you can set up a cohort with 4 teams and sort of play those teams regardless if they're within the community or not. So, for example, the Junior B team here, the Kamloops Storm, had a cohort going with Revelstoke, as well as Caisse and Armstrong, North Okanagan, all within an hour or so, except for Revelstoke a bit up the highway. And they thought that with the new guidance that these cohorts could continue, that they could stay within their health district and play hockey games. But then word came out late Friday that no, you can't leave your city or your hockey association to play games. And that's across the board. That's not just hockey. That's everything that's going on right now. All sports. So there's some soccer going on, things like that. So it all sort of got kiboshed here for 2 weeks. They'll reevaluate December 7th. But as of now, no travel and not a lot of sports unless you just want to stay home.
So that's because I know we have those cohorts out here. So in most of our hockey leagues, North Division plays the North Division, South Division plays South Division. And I think the rules state there can't be any more than 6 teams in a cohort. And then, same thing, they're going to reevaluate. But so it's just on pause for 2 weeks in BC right now?
Yeah, they're going to reevaluate where it's at. The case count numbers actually today were a record amount in the province, over 900, which is real bad news for sure. So they want to get a handle. They want to have what they call a circuit breaker, right? That's one of the phrases we're hearing when it comes to COVID-19. And then we'll see. So really, I think the feeling is that maybe these restrictions might last a little longer. In fact, the only regular season going on in these parts, hockey-wise, is the KIJHL, which you've also helped out with in the past there, JD. They only got 1 weekend, and then everybody's on pause right now as they await word on what the next step is.
So what in BC for your guys' regulations, like out here in Saskatchewan, they got to wear masks. The players have to wear masks basically up until they hit the ice. The coaches have to wear masks while they're on the bench. Is that the sort of same sort of protocol that you guys have in BC right now?
Yeah, similar. There's also restrictions on how early you can show up for games and how long you can wait until you have to be out of the rink afterwards. And there's actually officials, referees are part of their own bubble, their own cohort, right? So it's actually interesting. They've actually changed some rules up with some of the hockey leagues where no scrums after the whistle. If you're involved in anything in front of the net, you're asked to immediately remove the area from the area. If you don't, there's a penalty right away. So no scrums, no fighting, none of this stuff here that may give you extra exposure to someone with COVID-19. So it's changing the game somewhat a little bit here. We'll see how far it goes and how many leagues actually adopt that when we get going.
So that's 2 minutes for COVID then.
Yeah,
that's
I guess
we're going to call it.
Yep. Yeah, exactly.
Oh gosh. Okay. So obviously, with the new restrictions, people aren't very happy with what's going on right now with where the government's going. And do you think that with all these restrictions coming down, there's just going to be another lockdown and you can kiss the start of the WHL season goodbye?
Well, certainly hope not. I mean, the league has already been pushed back twice as far as start dates go, but it's not without within the realm of possibility that there's going to be more lockdowns. I mean, really, we haven't got a handle on this virus. It looked like it went away in the summertime, right? Like it was life back to normal for the most part this summer. Everybody enjoyed their summer, but they talked about a second wave, JD, and I guess we're living in that second wave right now. And how long will it last? We don't know. It likely will last, into the new year sometime and see where we go from there. But yeah, really, the WHL can say they want to start January 8th and be all hard tied to that date. But if the health office and the provincial ministry says no, there's no games, there's no crowds, there's no traveling, well, then you have to abide by that mandate. So very well, we could see no action in January. But I know the league is committed to it. The teams are committed to it, and they're going to, try their best to make it happen.
And with the WHL start date, I was kind of confused when it came out because obviously they had those health officers designated to each jurisdiction, from what I read. And was that January start date for everybody? Is that what they're planned for everybody, every province?
Yeah, you're right. You talk about jurisdictions. So you have 4 provinces and you have 2 states. And, the plan is to get everybody on board to start on January 8th. But there may be situations where one jurisdiction may start before the other just based on current restrictions. And the message might be, now it hasn't been officially put out there, but I've heard the message might be start when you can. If you can go January 8th and play, do it, play, and then try to get everybody to catch up. I think through all of this, the WHL still wants a way to find and crown a division champion somehow. And we're talking crowning that division champion, in May. So we got a long time here to go. The schedule might only be 40 games, might only be 34 games or less. It could be 50 games, depending on how many games you get in. But remember, you're just playing within your provincial cohort or your U.S. division of the 2 states. So they do have some wiggle room there as far as, not venturing outside of province or outside of the country to play. And we still got a U.S. border to worry about too. So find a way to play, find a way to crown a division champion, get down to 4 teams, and see where the virus is at here in the spring.
Well, I know when they were first talking about bringing it back, I was kind of wondering if they were going to just do that whole what they're doing now, because I know that it's like we're in each province, you're not allowed to travel for a sport outside of the province, and especially going into the United States, which is a whole other ball game. I felt that was probably the smartest move. But I know with Manitoba right now, it's even hard to think if they're going to be able to start because that whole province is on lockdown.
Yeah, Manitoba, and Saskatchewan's numbers aren't too
Yeah.
far right now too. But as we speak, it is the third week of November here, and we're getting closer to December, and maybe there's a circuit break around Christmas. Maybe not. Maybe all the gatherings of family and Christmas time and holidays increase the case count. We don't know what way it's going to go, but it's going to go somewhere. But you're right. We're trying to get all these provinces on board. Manitoba and Saskatchewan have to obviously work together and play together in this situation. And there's a lot of moving parts, but I think they feel into the spring that, maybe, it's a better situation and maybe there's some vaccinations happening to the vulnerable at that point. And maybe, and this is just, I'm an optimist here on this. I have to be. So, we're hoping that, we'll see some sort of hockey and maybe we even get it out of province here down the road as well.
Well, I can imagine you're itching to get back in the booth there, Sandman Center.
Yeah, I have enjoyed to a point having weekends off. It's funny, for 20 years, JD, I didn't have to plan a Friday or Saturday night from September to April because I knew where I'd be. I'd be at the rink. I'd be up. And, you miss a lot of, social gatherings. You miss a lot of other things, weddings and, just life events through doing this job. You're getting this all back now, but sometimes you wonder, what, it's not all it's cracked up to be. I think I'd rather be busy. Rather be in the battle, in the fight every Friday, Saturday night here during the wintertime. It definitely makes the winter go by a lot easier out here.
Well, and all the travel you get to do. I know you've been to every single hockey rink in the WHL, but it's still that experience and those stories you get to tell, and just watching the team play hockey.
It's a lot of fun. It is, and I was actually talking, to other staff members of the hockey club here, right? Like, you got 5 or 6 people that get along really well, adults, and you get a chance to spend some time together. And how often can you say that as adults when you're 40 years old and you go on a road trip with 5 or 6 other adults every couple of times a month? You go to the hotel room, and whether you win or you lose, you're going to debrief and you're going to have a couple drinks and you're going to say what went wrong, or why was this player doing this, or boy, we're good, boy, we're going to win it all, and you just kind of have that sense of family on the road, and yeah, you miss it. I was bugging the trainer that even nights where we lose 6-0 on the road and get back to the hotel room and shake our head, being like, what is going on this season? You still miss those times now when you put it all in perspective.
Well, my next question is going to be, how was it for the 20-year-olds last year after the season got canceled? You guys were in the States, you were saying, and then finally the season was postponed originally and then canceled. How was it for, Frankie and Husey and Martin, not being able to play their last few games in the playoffs in their 20-year-old year?
Yeah, that's extremely tough. And those are the guys I feel for sure. This was a team that was built to win, a team that had ran away with the BC division. In fact, it clinched it just a few nights earlier with a win in Tri-City. So, this was a team ready to go. And a lot of people were saying, the Blazers might have been the best team in the Western Conference. And, for it all to end abruptly. And to make matters worse here, JD, the very last game before the lockdown, we're in Spokane. And the Blazers had clinched the division. So I don't want to say the foot was off the gas pedal, but Spokane beat them 3-0. And Zane Franklin, Ryan Hughes, and you mentioned Martin as well, were all on the ice when the opposition goaltender lifted the puck 200 feet down the ice and scored a goalie goal. That'll be their last goal in the WHL. Their last memory will be this goaltender scoring against them and doing the fly by the bench, fist pumping all the way and celebrating here. And I remember Franklin saying, he's like, that can't be it. That can't be it. We're not going down like that. Not happening. So it's insult to injury a little bit to have it end the way it did.
Was that goalie from their import goalie?
Yeah.
What was his name?
Oh boy. He went through 2 different pronunciations this year. I always get these goalies mixed up here, but
starts with a P though, right?
Yeah, it's P. Oh, well, he's an LA Kings pick anyways here. So,
No. Parikh. No.
Yeah, Parikh. Yeah, Parikh.
Yeah.
That's really. See, I had such a mental scar from that goal. I probably try to remove his name from my brain after watching that happen. By the way, first time I've ever seen a goalie score a goal. So I guess it was, a little piece of history. There hasn't been many. I think there's been 9 in the WHL all time. So to be there live for one, I guess that's pretty cool.
Hey, that is definitely something you can say that a lot of people can't say. So, I guess you got to take the good from the bad.
Yeah, that's right. After all, it's just hockey, right? I mean, we're not conducting brain surgery. No lives are on the line. It's as much as you get into the battle, and you see me in the booth, right? Like I get right in there. As much as you like to think it's a big deal, it's just hockey. We're just playing games.
Okay, well, we're gonna take a short break and hear from our local sponsors, and we'll be right back.
At Super 8 Winnipeg West, we have your comfort in mind with free Wi-Fi and free daily Superstart breakfast. We also have guest laundry facilities, a state-of-the-art fitness center, and a jetted hot tub. Sleep well in a spacious guest room equipped with plush new bedding, a 50-inch flat-screen HD TV, microwave, mini refrigerator, and Keurig coffee maker. Or book a suite with a kitchen, ideal for extended stays. Super 8 Winnipeg West, located just inside the perimeter on Portage Avenue.
Welcome back to the Sask Sports Show. I am joined with Jon Keen. Before the break, we were talking about how these new COVID restrictions in BC has affected hockey, and we talked a little bit about if the January 8th start date for the WHL, and dived into a few more things as well. So coming out of the break, I'm just gonna how's the Blazers holding up through all of this? Not being able to start. I know some of them have gone play Junior A. Just to play hockey.
Yeah, there's a few in town that are skating. Some local guys, Logan Stankoven is a Kamloops kid. There's been others come through, kind of on their own, no team affiliation, but skating with other WHL caliber players here. Some of that's been going on. They're antsy, like I'll get a text message every once in a while asking what the latest is and all this stuff. And, I just tell them to be patient. Like it's a tough life for these guys, especially, again, you just talked about the 20-year-olds in the last segment. Well, we have another crop of 20-year-olds here trying to get going, Montana Onyebuchi, Oren Centazzo, Brody Stewart, Sean Strange, guys like that have a season up in limbo. Granted, you mentioned summer playing Junior A. Brody Stewart is doing that now, and Oren Centazzo in Alberta. So we're seeing a little bit of that, but they want to be here. They want to be in Kamloops. I mean, this just kind of scratches the itch, but it doesn't really do it for these guys. They want to be part of what was supposed to be another championship caliber team this year, JD. It's a good group. And, it's tough because they want to play. This is what they're meant to do. They feel like that's the case. And they've been, put on hold because of this.
Well, I know it was tough even for me to see that when the season got canceled, and like they had a team built that was built to win, that was going to probably take on Portland in the Western Conference Final, and that's the way it was going to be, and could have taken down Portland, probably played Edmonton in the WHL Final, could have gone on to the Memorial Cup, but you never know. And I guess my next question, we're talking about the Junior A. Do you agree that it's okay that to allow these kids to go play, to be loaned to Junior A teams until roughly December?
Yeah, I don't mind that. I think that's an opportunity for them to, keep their legs going, right? Like they're like thoroughbred horses, right? They got to run. They got to do their thing, and this allows them to, an opportunity to stay fresh and stay in game mode. A guy like Dylan Garand, I was speaking to him the other day, and he played his first game in 8 months was that Canada red-white scrimmage that he was in. So he's got high caliber shooters all of a sudden. That was his first real game action. These guys got to stay fresh, and if a guy like Oren Centazzo, Brody Stewart, these guys can hit the ground running when they do come back to the team, which is, scheduled. The loan only goes to December 20th. Then that's going to bode well for everybody. I have no problem with these guys, exploring some options in the WHL, giving them that right to do so.
Well, and speaking of Dylan, and I know Connor's there as well, how are they doing? I know they had a couple of cases coming back positive today. They had to cancel one of their games. How are they making out in training camp there?
Yeah, they're doing great. I spoke to Dylan Garand last night before you mentioned the two COVID cases coming down with the players. It's not either of the Blazer players there, but Dylan Garand was. It's funny because in a WHL game, JD, there's maybe one line, two lines that can really hurt you, right? Like, so you're keying on 5-6 forwards that can, make something happen, with a puck, shoot, pass, something that, you have to be aware of. Here it's 4 lines coming at you. There's no break, this camp is elite. And Dylan said that, he had to kind of, the pace caught him off guard, surprised him. He played half a game. He didn't allow a goal on 11 shots, but it's a tough ask. And, for Connor Zary, he's performed really well. He had a 3-point game in the last scrimmage. Coach Andre Tarini mentioned that he's been great, and he's been a flexible player that can, play in all situations. And when I hear a coach talk about how he can take faceoffs, play the penalty kill, power play center, play left wing, play where the team needs him, that's a good sign. That tells me that Hockey Canada wants Connor Zary on the team, and I think that there's a good chance there could be 2 Blazers this year on that squad.
Well, I'm happy to hear that. Just from last year when he got the chance just to go and he would let go early in the camp, to now has shown me that he has grown as not even a player but as a person as well. His game's grown. Like, he was unstoppable. He went to, if there's anything that he could have got invited to last year, he got invited to it. Top prospects, the World Juniors, like, got all that experience. Obviously, it didn't end the way he wanted it to, but it's, the way the cookie crumbles, and hopefully he can come back strong and lead the Blazers to another division title.
Yeah, and he packaged up all of this, this disappointment of not making the team. Let's keep in mind he wasn't initially invited, and then was recalled a secondary invite. I remember being on the road in Brandon and getting the word like, "Hey Connor, you're going, you're taking off. You got invited to junior camp," and there was hugs and high fives all around, and everyone was really excited about it. That you're behind the 8 ball coming into that situation where you weren't part of their first thought process, and now you get invited in. But he packaged up all the naysayers, and there's some naysayers out there, and turned it into an NHL first-round selection of the Calgary Flames. That's huge. That was a goal of his. It happened. First Blazer first-round pick since 2009. And, hopefully he's got the experience, the maturity now to roll that into making this year's Canada team, which is going to be pretty good, especially if you don't have the NHL playing. You got some of these guys available, like a Kirby Dach all of a sudden. Maybe an Alexis Lafreniere, who knows? It's going to be a good team. And if you make this team, that's saying something for sure.
Well, and kind of get off topic about the Blazers, I'm happy to see that Taylor Gauthier is there. It was nice to see another WHL goalie, especially with how good he is. I realized that I think he was one of the goalies that faced the most shots last year. I think he's a really great goaltender. Same with Dylan Garand, and all those guys that are there are meant to be there for a reason. It was just, I don't know. I just watched Taylor for a while, and I just felt that he's finally getting noticed.
Yeah, Blazers would need 50, 60 shots tonight to win those games, and even that wasn't enough sometimes. He's played really well against the Blazers. He has experience with Hockey Canada already at the U18s. In fact, him and Dylan Garand were the tandem for the U18s that year. And he's a guy that I expect to be one of the 3 goaltenders here for sure. Hasn't, had a great sort of training camp so far, or selection camp, and 4 goals allowed the other night. We're talking goals in the power play, tough shooters. But he's a guy I expect to be there. But, Canada does have 5 goaltenders, so, 3 are going to make it, 2 aren't. So we'll see. We'll see who those 2 are.
Well, I remember that one game. I think it was the first game that PG and Kamloops played, and they won 1-0.
Yes, yeah.
It was
Race Ramsey was going to go on the other side, and finally was a Matthew Semenoff scored from a really sharp angle in the 3rd period.
Beginning of the 3rd, I think it was, roughly, yeah. No,
And
but
up in PG, he was Gauthier was really good against the Blazers. Like we're 50 some saves a night. So he's a tough nut to crack for sure, and we'll see if he gets the opportunity.
well, do you feel that with this 20-year-olds gone, and do you feel that the Blazers still have the momentum to continue their their path of being division champions last year and pushing that forward to this year?
Yeah, without a doubt. I think what we were all talking about last year at this time and even into the spring was what Blazer team will be better, this year's team or next year's team. And that was a definite question. Sure, you lose a lot of heart and soul, right? Like, Zane Franklin's tough to replace. He's your captain and he does so much. But the young talent on this team is as best as I've seen in my time here. And, we're talking about Logan Stankoven, Matthew Semenoff, Caden Bank here. That was a line of 16-year-olds that were fantastic together. So they're just a year older. You got Dylan Garand in goal for his 18-year-old season. He's only 18. Like, he still has another year of junior eligibility or 2 years of junior eligibility. He's in goal. You're bringing back Connor Zeri, Oren Centazzo, Josh Pillar, up and down the lineup. This team can throw 4 lines at you. And we're going to see some more players come through. I don't know if you were following the Bantam draft a couple years back, but the Blazers took 2 players in the first round that were committed to the University of Michigan. Both dropped that commitment and signed with the Blazers. So they just have another wave of talent coming here that should bolster them. And yeah, last year's team was good, and that'll be tough to replace those departing players. But boy, there's a lot of good talent coming up that hopefully has this team in a good position.
Well, who do you think is going to step up the most this year? What players do you think?
Well, I think the plan would be for Logan Stankoven to step into that center role or at least play with Zeri and Centazzo. That's a pretty good line right there that you can throw at somebody here. And, I think that, Logan Stankoven coming off 29 goals in the shortened season was fantastic start. Sky's the limit for his production here for sure. Really, when you look at it, their blue line had, guys like Montana Onyebuchi ready to move up into a bigger role. Their 2 imports that were coming in, both Iñaki Barragano and their Swedish import, who we've yet to see, who was drafted by the Canucks. That's another, weapon. Victor Person's his name. But Josh Pillar is a guy that didn't get drafted. He'd be having a chip on his shoulder too, and could look for that 20 to 30 goal plateau. And really, there was so much depth here that it didn't quite matter who would be on the ice this year. You'd have 4 lines that could do the damage, and that's a pretty good thing to have here when really you can be a threat every time your forward group's on the ice, and then you got Dylan Garand in goal to backstop you there.
Well, who do you think is going to be Dylan's backup next year? Like, what's the story with Race? Because he would be a 20-year-old this year, wouldn't he?
Race should be 19 this year.
Oh, 19. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. But he is eligible to return. The Blazers have a really good young goaltender that would be 16 this year coming through the ranks. Dylan, his brother, plays in Kelowna here. They're from Weyburn. The name escapes me here for whatever reason tonight.
He plays for the Warriors in Moose Jaw, right?
Yes, he does.
Yeah.
Yes, Dylan. He's got a WHL name. His brother's in Kelowna there, but he's another one. He's already represented Canada at the Youth Olympics. So at 15. So there would be a good battle for the backup spot there.
Is it Mads Lindgren?
No. That's the defenseman. That's the 16-year-old defenseman. Yeah.
Oh, Ty Spencer.
No, Ty Spencer's he's a forward. Yeah, you're knocking on there. His name's Dylan. It's Dylan for whatever reason, and I apologize to the family, but he's from Weyburn. And it's funny because to play in Kamloops as a goaltender, your name has to be Dylan, right? Dylan Ferguson, Dylan Garand, and Dylan. So JD, it's a thing where these guys would have a great backup scenario here. And, I think that Race Ramsey has proven when he could do it. But, I think you have a 19-year-old goaltender and an 18-year-old goaltender, and a 19-year-old as a backup isn't a thing you normally see. So the youngster coming in at 16 would probably be the guy that you'd be looking at, for that backup job here for sure. Dylan Ernst. I'm sorry, Dylan Ernst. His brother Ethan plays with the Kelowna Rockets.
Yes, that's right. That's right. I knew he played for the AAA Warriors in Moose Jaw.
Yeah.
I knew that. And Ty Spencer plays for, I'm pretty sure, the Contacts in Saskatoon. Or no, the Blazers. Plays for the Blazers in Saskatoon.
And Logan Barros is a prospect that plays in Saskatoon there as well. There's been a great Saskatoon pipeline for this hockey club over the years. Another guy the Blazers hope to land is Boston Buckberger, who plays in Saskatoon. Good puck-moving defenseman here. There's just so much talent. There's a Luke Corte coming up through the ranks too, a third-round Bantam pick who played at Yale Academy. The links to Saskatoon and the Blazers here recently. Colin Shirley captained the team. Garrett Pilon, a Washington Capitals draft pick here. They have great scouting out in Saskatchewan, and it's always great to add these guys into the mix.
Well, and you just look at even the leagues that they have with the SJHL. They have a great Saskatchewan Midget AAA Hockey League. You know, from the little bit that I've seen, and even when I wasn't living here, I was still looking into it. You know, they got like teams like Notre Dame and the Regina Junior Pack Canadians and Saskatoon and PA and North Battleford and all those teams. Swift Current, Moose Jaw. Saskatchewan just breeds hockey.
Yeah, and the thing is, too, why WHL teams like that Saskatchewan AAA Midget League, I guess it's a U18 league now. That's a tough transition to say U18s and get rid of the term midget, is the fact that league really emulates the WHL. These players go on long road trips. They play back-to-back nights on the road. A team like Swift Current would go to, Tisdale and play twice, or, in Saskatoon and play both teams on the road. PA play twice. The long bus rides, the late travel, on the road, back-to-back games, it resembles the WHL, and I think it really develops, these players for the next level. And that's I used to call games in that league, and I know what it's about. It definitely is a great stepping stone to the next level.
Yeah, no, and like you look at a lineup sheet, for the Blazers or the Contacts, and they have the little emblems beside them who they're drafted by. They're all drafted.
Yeah,
there's not one player that either doesn't play drafted by an SJHL team or a WHL team. And like I was talking to a guy from a coach and their captain from Yorkton, and just talking about the pedigree that's coming out, not even in Yorkton, their team, and as a Terrier, and same with Swift Current's coach. I was talking to him. He used to coach in Notre Dame, and he said, talking to me about that whole process, and it's just. A small town like Wilcox, Saskatchewan, having such an elite program like that.
Yeah, well, it's Notre Dame, right? Like they're a hockey factory, and at all levels, SJHL. And then, when I was out there, it was the Hounds and the Argos. They had two elite level midget talented teams. I'm not sure if it's still the same way out there, but I've called some games in that old rink and up in that broadcast location, and yeah, it's awesome. It's great training ground, and it's a great league. It's a great province.
Well, we're going to. I could talk about Saskatchewan hockey all day. Like but we're going to take a short break and hear from our sponsors, and when we come back, we're going to be talking. We're going to be diving into Jon's career, something that he probably hasn't really been done. Being interviewed. So we're going to interview and talk to him about his WHL play-by-play career. We'll be back in a few moments. Okay, and we're back to the Sask Sports Show. Joining me is Jon Keen, a WHL play-by-play broadcaster for the Kamloops Blazers. So before we took the last commercial break, we were just kind of talking about the Blazers and what their projections for this season, and talking about some of their prospects coming up through the ranks. So now I'm going to dive into Jon's play-by-play career. So you're from Lanigan, Saskatchewan, correct? That's where you're born and raised?
An hour east of Saskatoon, there where you're at right now. Yeah.
So growing up in Lanigan, what what led you into broadcasting? You know, living in a small town Saskatchewan town, kind of what was the factor there to get you into play-by-play?
You know, I think everything in a small town of Saskatchewan revolves around the game. Like, you know, I remember we were talking before we started the interview tonight. We were talking about senior hockey, and I remember going to Lanigan Pirate games when I was like 7 or 8 years old, and just thinking like, this was the NHL. Like, I didn't know any better. Like, I thought this was the best level of talent you could ever have. And I remember at a young age too, at the rink, volunteering to do the public address. That's kind of what I started doing, was the public address, the goals, the penalties, you know, one last minute to play in the first period type stuff here. And that kind of got me on my path a little bit here. And I grew up as well with a couple players, and played with 2 players that went on to play in the NHL. And that were the Brookbank brothers. In fact, we lived across the street from each other for a few years. And, you know, I definitely credit, you know, that sort of influence for me as well, to kind of get me tuned into junior hockey. I remember going to Wade's games, Wade, the older one that went on to play in the NHL with about 6 or 7 different teams. I remember going to his junior games when he played at the Yorkton Terriers, and that kind of got me into a little bit of junior hockey. And in that realm, and you know, I just started doing more public address. And another thing too is I listened to a lot of radio when I was a kid too. I listened to one of my biggest influences is just down the road in Moose Jaw. Rob Carney was the former voice of the Moose Jaw Warriors. I remember, you know, listening to a game from the Crush Can, and lots of games, and just the theater of the mind that radio could create. And I was just thinking, wow, like this is exciting. Or maybe Moose Jaw would be on the road in Prince George, and I'd be tuned into a game in Prince George. I just thought it was the coolest thing ever. And I just, from that point, I think wanted to get into hockey play-by-play, wanted to get into sports broadcasting. And I just was given a great opportunity to kind of chase that. And lo and behold, you know, I'm still doing it 20 years later.
So you wanted to, you know, paint that picture with your voice for viewers. You enjoyed that. So that's kind of what you wanted to do.
Yeah, not only that here, but, you know, I love the effect that crowd noise can have. Like, I just think, you know, a good crowd mic and having the ambiance of the building come through on the radio, I love that. You know, like if the opposition has a goal song or a chant, you know, I want that on the radio. Oh, Canada, I want that on the radio. Like, I want to have that help paint the picture of what's going on here. I just love that live sound, and I think there's such a room for it that, you know, broadcasters are missing out when they can't have that. And listening to the crazy nights in Prince George or in the Crushed Can, you know, listening to WHL hockey, I was just like, this is awesome. Like, I think this is the pinnacle, and this is what I wanted to do. And, you know, all that theater of the mind and all those little things in radio that you can bring to life through that speaker is just, it's awesome.
Oh, I know that, the old Moose Jaw Arena. I'm pretty sure the seats were about, you know, like about this. You were looking over top of the rink. It was a very interesting rink for sure.
What's your history in that rink there? Were you ever in there at all, or?
Yeah, I played. I had rep tryouts there for Bantam AA. I ended up making the team, but had to move to Swift Current. But yeah, no, it was very interesting. And then, great. You know,
now it's a parking lot. It's too bad.
No, it was a great hockey rink. Like, it did what it had to do. It just the seats, you're just looking over top of the rink the whole time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, very steep steps there. When you're hauling broadcast gear up the steps, you got to watch yourself. You face plant pretty quick.
So what kind of, you know, you're talking about public addressing and whatnot. Well, what kind of, you know, that kind of what you got into it, but what sports did you play as a kid growing up?
Well, when you grow up in small town Saskatchewan, you have to play every sport if you want a team, because it takes everybody to play that sport, right? So, you know, growing up, of course, it's funny, actually, hockey, I didn't start hockey until actually first year midget. All my friends played. I'm not sure why I never got into it at a younger age, but it wasn't until first year midget when I played, and went on to go play senior, played a season with the Lanigan Pirates as well, and then went off to college, and that was that. But you name it, you had to play high school soccer, volleyball, basketball. I never won a high school basketball game. We were terrible at basketball, but we fouled out real quick because we were, prairie boys, and we just never really, it wasn't really a sport that Lanigan really picked up on, was basketball. But, we even played handball, if you can believe it. There was a handball league, and we actually had a team in Lanigan that we played. But, we didn't have tackle football, but there was a touch football team growing up as well we played on. But you name it. If you wanted to have a team in a high school or a club environment, everybody had to play to make it work.
So growing, I've lived in those small towns. You gotta be the center for your basketball team, and then the strike, and then the spiker for your volleyball team, or whatever it's called.
Sure. Yeah. Baseball in the summer, everybody played baseball. It was, and golf too. Played a million rounds on that 9-hole track just on the other side of town. So you had to play it all. You had to do it all, and that's, I think, helped me as well develop my career as a sports broadcaster, because I focus on a lot of local sports here in Kamloops, and we also try to follow that scene as well.
So were you like, when you were a child, your kid growing up, did you kind of do that play-by-play in your head, or try to kind of do what the guys do on the radio?
I remember as a real young kid, and JD, I'm probably dating myself, and you won't probably know what I'm talking about, but you'd have a cassette tape, okay? And you could tape over the 2 holes on top of that cassette tape. You could tape it over, and then you could actually use that tape and record over whatever was on it. And people used to always record the top 6 at 6 on the radio on their little cassette player. So I would press play and record, like just right there.
Yeah.
And I would actually, I remember I would like fake doing a sports cast, and then a newscast, and then the weather. And I would tape that and listen back to myself. I don't know how old I was, but I would, I'd always be like, wow, you sound weird on tape. And that's kind of, what we did as a kid. And I think a lot of kids did that, but just the fact that, now I've made it a career out of it, I think is maybe the story out of it. But play-by-play, we had video games back then, and, maybe we did a little bit of it, but for the most part, no, I remember recording like news and sportscasts, actually, if you can believe it.
Well, I guess you started early. I know that's your job now. I know you worked for Radio NL, so it's kind of it's fitting, doing that. But who was your hockey team growing up? Who did you cheer for in the NHL?
Yeah, so when I think every 40-something male and female, for that matter, in Saskatchewan, like the Edmonton Oilers. And I probably was an Edmonton Oilers guy up until I was about 11 or 12 years old. And then there was a player in Prince Albert with the Raiders that came in from Michigan that really set the world on fire and was a first overall draft pick, Mike Modano. And Mike Modano got me on the Minnesota North Stars. And I have old North Star jerseys I remember in like grade 7 and 8. And I all of a sudden was a Minnesota North Star fan. And, they moved to Dallas, and I continued to follow them in Dallas. And, I remember going to, for years, Dallas and Edmonton would always end up in the playoffs against each other. I don't know what it was, but they'd always play each other in the first round. And we'd load up the car and go to Edmonton, and we'd go to playoff games. I'd be the only one in the building in a Dallas Star jersey. I'd be getting stuff thrown at me, and people, kicking me and pouring their beer all over me. But I was that one Dallas Star fan at Northlands Coliseum, 16, 17 years old, when we'd go to these playoff games. It was a lot of fun.
Well, I was going to say, hey, you're probably an Oilers or a Flames or a Jets fan, because that's about all you have to choose from in Saskatchewan. If you're a Canucks fan, you must be from BC, then you moved over to Saskatchewan, but then you've been converted to an Oilers fan. But no. Well, like you said that you went to college. Whereabouts did you go to college?
I was considering Western Academy in Saskatoon. It was on the list, and I looked into a couple different schools, and I actually, because I had some family in Lethbridge, I decided to go to Lethbridge Community College at the time. I think it's now just called Lethbridge College. They have a broadcast arts, broadcast journalism program there. And I said, hey, I'm going to give it a shot. I remember writing the entrance exam. I think it was like 2 + 2 = 4, right? I'm like, yeah. And, the sentence together. It wasn't much of an entrance exam, but I got accepted and just thought, yes, this is the best. Like, I got accepted to community college. Like, here we go. They really sold it to me, right? Like it was the greatest thing ever. And I remember, JD, I don't know what it was like for you on your first day here, but there was, I think there was 35 or 40 of us in that first year broadcast journalism class in 1990, I think the fall of 98, I think it was. And they asked, what do you want to do in broadcasting? Do you want to be a news person, a DJ? Do you want to, what do you want to do? Sports guy. And not a lie, 7 guys stood up and said they wanted to do hockey play-by-play. And I'm like, oh my God, like I got 7 in this first year class that wants to do this year. Like, how am I going to ever stand out? Like, what am I going to do to separate myself here? So, definitely there was a lot of interest in that. And, I think I'm the only one doing that now from that school, from that graduating class.
Well, it's good. Well, it looks like he outshined them all, or maybe they could have just maybe gone down different paths too. Because when you go to school, you find some
paths that probably pay way more money, probably something like that.
Yeah, doing voiceovers or doing commercials.
Yeah, totally. But it was a great training ground. And one thing before we went on air here, you were talking about doing some senior hockey games and things like that around. We were given the opportunity to work with Shaw Television there on a volunteer basis, and there was a great producer there that wanted to do mobile sports broadcasts as much as he could. And I volunteered for everything. I did pee-wee hockey. I did college volleyball, college basketball. I did senior hockey. I did Lethbridge University Pronghorns games. And when I was in second year, I got a chance to call a WHL game on Shaw in my second year in Lethbridge against the Regina Pats. And I just thought, like, wow, like what an opportunity. And I really was awful and had to learn just through repetition. That's one thing I've talked to you about too, right? When you said you wanted to get into this, right? You got to lay a foundation and get a game plan going here and get your cadence and get your style down. And, Lethbridge really allowed me to do that. As the producer's name was Bob Adams. And every time I go back to Lethbridge, he's always at the rink, and I get to say hello and thank him for that opportunity.
Well, you got a call right beside Roddy Peterson, didn't you? That game.
I wouldn't have known who Rod was at the time, and I'm not sure if he might have been in Prince Albert at the time, actually. So I don't remember. But I remember my color man being Dan Plaster, who actually went on to do some Regina Pats hockey as well in Regina. But yeah, I remember another thing I did, JD, when I was in college is that I would knock on every WHL visitor broadcast door. I would walk in and introduce myself. And I know you had Les Lazaruk on this show. And Les was one of the first people that I came up, knocked on the door, and said, "Hi, Les. I'm Jon Keen. I'm in broadcast journalism. I want to be in the WHL and call games." And he looked at me like, first of all, why are you interrupting me in the middle of a post-game show? Okay, so settle down there, youngster. Settle down, youngster. And I'll get your information later. But he was one of the guys that I stepped in to introduce myself. I did that a few times. Brad Curl was the radio guy for the Hurricanes at the time, who's now the voice of the Calgary Hitmen. And I just, I was kind of fearless. Like I just inserted myself into as many of these conversations as I could. It worked out great with Les. I actually did my practicum at CJWW, and at that time, Hot 93 out of college in Lethbridge. Les was the guy that I answered to and gave me assignments and did sportscasts and some things. And, till this day, we still talk quite a bit. And, he's on the circuit, and I always like running into Les. So, it's just a great advice just to make as many connections as you can and knock on as many doors as you can.
Well, that's kind of what I've been trying to do with this show too, just kind of get my name out there. And like I've had you, I've had Les, I've had Roddy on the show. And just talking to also, hockey coaches and stuff like that too. Like I've told you many times, this is definitely something I want to do. Like I want to, that's kind of my passion. So and I thank you for, taking the time to talk to me about it too.
Yeah, well, JD, you came up to the booth there, and I know there's a family connection with my wife and your dad there as far as clients with advertising and things like that. And credit to you. Before you went to school, you went out and started doing Thompson Blazer midget games and started doing some Kamloops Storm games to really kind of see if that's what you wanted to do. And I said, hey, go out and see if that's what you want to do. And if that's what you want to do, then go to school for it. And that's what you're doing. So that's great to see.
Well, I know I will always be grateful for that, John. We're going to take another short break and hear from our sponsors, and we'll be right back for some more Sask Sports Show. And we're back in the Sask Sports Show, again joined by with my guest Jon Keen. And before we went for commercial, we talked about kind of John growing up in rural Saskatchewan and where he went to school and kind of the opportunities that he got while he was at school, but also the work that he had to put in to get those opportunities as well. So. I know we were talking about Les Lazaruk before, and you did your practicum, but what other kind of guys did you look up to when you were trying to get into the WHL?
Yeah, Les was a big one, but there were lots. And I remember my first full-time radio job was in Swift Current, and the guy at the time there was Regan Bartel. And I remember going to Swift Current to start that job. The radio station put me up at a hotel for a couple of nights. I turn on the TV and I'm watching. There was a tape delayed Swift Current Broncos game. I was like, okay, let's see, what the broadcaster's like in Swift Current. I don't know if you know anything about Regan, but he has the voice of God. He has this big booming voice that is top-notch delivery. And I thought to myself, I'm sitting in my hotel room, and I said, I want to do hockey play-by-play at some point somewhere. And I go, and this is the guy that's in Swift Current? Like, I thought I got no hope. Like, what about the guy that's going to be in Prince Albert or in Moose Jaw? Like, I just got no hope at all. But yeah, Regan was one for sure. We keep in touch. I both think we're in great spots now. He's in Kelowna. I'm here in Kamloops, so I see a lot of him. For sure over the course of the year. I mentioned Rob Carney growing up listening to the radio in Moose Jaw. He's a longtime voice of the Moose Jaw Warriors. He was another one that I looked up to, and I remember getting an interview for the Moose Jaw job a few years down the road after that, and I was able to tell him that stuff. Didn't get the job, but still, there's a lot of guys in the WHL. At the NHL level, I've always emulated and looked up to guys like Chris Cuthbert. For me, he's top-notch and a great guy. And, I think he's so well-rounded. He's the best football guy in Canada. He's the best hockey guy in Canada as well. Bob Cole, for me, is a guy that, when I'm calling a game, JD, through a radio, I always try to match the intensity of the game that's going on with my voice. And as the game's energy and emotion picks up, as the moment picks up, I also want to be able to match that. And nobody did that better than Bob Cole. And I think I have a little bit of his influence as far as him raising the level as the climax of the game hits. And those are just some of the names, I think, JD, that come to mind.
Well, I think Bob Cole's one of my idols too. I think if you talk to any broadcaster, I feel like they're going to say that Bob Cole is definitely somebody that they've either looked up to or somebody that they try to emulate in that matter.
Yeah, and he's just, and I hope he can keep going. I mean, I know that he had the big retirement and everything, and it'd be nice to hear his voice once in a while here, but just some of the stuff he did in the Stanley Cup Finals. Some of his older work, like in the 80s, if you ever get it down a YouTube rabbit hole, some of the stuff just brings shivers, just how good it is and how much memories it brings back as well listening to it.
Yeah, he's definitely he has a very, very distinctive voice as well. And then going back to Regan Bartel, I actually, once I started to look into who he was, I realized that he is from Saskatchewan as well. And
there you go.
Yeah. And what was it like? I know he has his famous saying, "Pitter patter, let's get at her" at the start of every face-off, or the starting face-off of every game. Usually, from what I've heard, he likes to use that. But what did you, when you got the job in Swift Current, did it come with the color job for the Broncos, or is that something you just kind of did every now and then once you moved to Swift Current?
Yeah, so Regan and actually Everett Hinley, who's now MLA for the Saskatchewan Party. I think he was just named to the cabinet as well last week. He did color with Regan, those two longtime friends. Regan moved on 6 months later to Kelowna. He actually got the Kelowna Rockets job at that point. I was nowhere near ready to take over the reins. So I did color for 3 seasons as Joey Kenward came to Swift Current and did 3 years there. And those 3 years of color, introduced me to the league. It introduced me to, more importantly, the hockey club. The WHL Broncos got to know who I was and covering the team there. And it also allowed me to do play-by-play on my own. You mentioned, AAA midget there, the Legionnaires. I did some of their games, and I did some of the AAA midget games there, the Wildcats, the AAA female team there too. So while doing color, for the home games, the 36 home games and playoffs, I also was, doing the AAA ranks and trying to stay sharp that way.
Well, and how was that for you, just to be able to be in that environment and that atmosphere doing color beside a WHL play-by-play broadcaster?
Yeah, it was awesome. In fact, my first color game, Regan actually took me on the road to Regina. We traveled up together. I remember we talked all the way there, and I'm trying to make such a good impression that I had no voice left for the actual game itself. And we laugh about it too, because Regan, I know, likes to kind of take it easy on the way up and kind of rest his voice. We talked all the way up and down the Trans-Canada, and he allowed me that opportunity to do color for the first time, and I thought that was really nice of him. That was awesome. That position of doing color commentary really lets you see how a play-by-play guy operates as well at that level, what they need to work into the broadcast, their commercials, their features, and really those 3 years. I may have felt like I was ready after Regan left, but I wasn't. And those 3 years to sort of learn more and learn more about the league, definitely beneficial.
What was the one thing that you learned the most from Regan that you'll never forget?
There's a lot of things about Regan, and maybe it was his excitement level on goals. You always remember when you're calling a game on the radio, a lot of people aren't listening intently. They're not holding the radio and listening to it, like what's going on in the game. They're doing other things. They're in the garage, they're working, maybe they're making dinner, or they're driving, or they're watching their kids, and they only really tune in until they hear that inflection, that something out of the ordinary is happening right now, be it a save, a goal chance, an opportunity, a scoring chance, or an actual goal. So it's those moments, JD, where I think you really have to bring it alive to grab that casual listener back to the radio and be like, so that inner alarm goes off for them to say, like, something's happening here. What is it? And then they tune in. So I think Regan did a great job of elevating those moments and making them come through. And I think that's one of the things that, I learned from him for sure.
Well, so after you did 3 years of color, what was the process? Did they just offer you the job? Did they interview you for possibility of the job? Like, what kind of was the process in that before you got the job?
Well, when Joey left, Joey got a great opportunity to go back to BC and work for the Vancouver Giants after 3 seasons. And one advice that I'll say to young broadcasters is, at the WHL level, it's not only the radio station that has to like you. That WHL team has to like you as well. You need that WHL team to know who you are, and in a case, sort of vouch for you as well. So my first step, I went to the hockey club. I sat down with the general manager, the head coach, and the business development guy, and said, guys, like, I've known you now for a few years. Hopefully you're comfortable with me. I'm going to go after this play-by-play job at the radio station now, and I would love your endorsement. and I got that endorsement, which was huge. So when it comes to talking to the radio station, when you have the WHL team that you're going to be calling games and basically embedded with for 7 months, the radio station, that was hard to deny. And I don't think they had other interviews. They might have had other interviews I'm not aware of, but I remember they say, John, if you want the job, it's your job. And I remember that moment. And, that was pretty special to hear that. But for a young broadcaster, you may think the radio station calls the shots a lot of times, and they do, but you need to have that WHL team on board. You also need to have, even for a pro job, it's going to be that pro team has to know who you are. They have to be comfortable with you. They have to vouch for you because they in the end make that decision.
Well, and so you got the job as being the play-by-play broadcaster for the Broncos. Tell me about your first game. Tell me about the ride to the rink. Did you puke before the game? How was your pre-game? Like, what was it like for you?
Yeah, I don't remember a ton of that. I remember, I think it was a home game, and which was great because the setup, everything was already set up in the daytime, all the broadcast gear. That's another great tip for a broadcaster. The first thing you do to go to the rink, set up your broadcast gear, because you're always going to get a curveball at some point. Something's not going to work. You're going to have technical difficulties. Set it up, make sure you got a connection, and then go from there. I remember the team that year was a great team. It was led by Tyler Redenbach, who won the scoring title that year, Jeremy Williams, Aaron Rome. It was a good team. And I remember there was so much hype about this team that year. And if I recall, Prince Albert Raiders came in and shut the Broncos out on opening night 3-0. And it was such a air coming out of the balloon, right? Like it just fizzled down, and it was a bit disappointing. But the next night, as teams often do, they play a home and home. The Broncos went up to Prince Albert and beat them in overtime, and that was a pretty thrilling opening weekend. But I think that those are my first memories of a game. I never was really too nervous, JD, and I don't want to sound like arrogant or cocky about this, but many times before a broadcast, I think to myself, like, you were born to do this. Like this, this is the fun part. This is the easy part. You put in your prep work. You've got everything down. You've done your homework. You know the rosters. You're born to do this. So for me, it was always something like I was only nervous about a result. I was never nervous about a performance or nervous about a call or technical issues. I was just nervous about a result of winning and losing, because that makes the world go around a lot of times, especially when, it's a big game and, maybe you're playing your rival.
And do you feel that while you were in Swift Current, you kind of found your own voice? Because, I know I've talked to you about this before, but I remember living in southern Saskatchewan, living in Gull Lake, which is about 45 minutes from Swift, and hearing you on the radio and your goal call, just you talking, your very distinct voice. And then when you move back to Kamloops, and I moved back to Kamloops, I'm like, hey, that's the same voice.
Same guy, yes.
Well, do you feel that you found your voice in Swift Current?
Yeah, I think for me, I had to find an energy level consistent for 60 minutes. You're always learning new phrases, picking up on, explanation and description of where the puck is. A lot of my goal call, you mentioned Regan, I think, is influenced in it, but a lot of that has to come from an emotional level. Like, you have to be genuinely invested in the game in order for some of this emotion to come out. If you're not invested, if you don't like doing it, if you're just punching the clock, you're not going to have a lot of excitement in your call. But if you're genuinely and emotionally connected to that game or to that result, I think that's when you're going to have your best moments and your best game calls. Some say that can be a bit of a homer, but I think, genuinely, when you get vested into it, is when your best stuff comes out.
No, and in the 10 years that you were in Swift Current, if I did the math correctly, they made the playoffs 9 times. So you got to watch some really good hockey. Do you have a favorite moment or moments, in the regular season playoff, that sort of thing?
Was it 9 times out of 10? Boy, I remember one year. I remember it was the lockout year, 2004-05, and that team won 22 games, which was actually a lot considering they set the CHL record for fewest goals scored in a single season. I think it was 130 some goals, and I remember, JD, that team got shut out 17 times that year, and there was nights where they weren't going to score. And I wouldn't recommend this to anybody these days, but the game would be in the middle of the period, and I could take a commercial break mid-game because I know I wasn't going to miss anything sometimes. So I was like, dump the puck in, let's take a break, almost to that level. So that was a rough year, but the team still found a way to win 22 games that year, considering they couldn't put the puck in the net. For me, JD, the Broncos didn't have a lot of huge playoff runs when I was there. I missed that championship run there by a few years back there in 2017, 2018, when they won the league title. But for me, there was such rivalry with the Regina Pats one year, and for that matter, every year. And I remember you mentioned Roddy, the broadcasters had the blog wars going on, and our fan base, was on their fans, and their fans would come. And I remember Ryan Schweitzer was my longtime color man there in Swift Current, who just won a city council seat there. So congratulations to Ryan. The fans in Regina hated us so much. One night they threw rubber rats on the ice. On the back of it, somebody painted Schweitzer. On the other rat, they wrote Keen, and it was just and it was all generated from online and blogs, and that matter, not really social media wasn't really a thing yet. But Roddy found a way to orchestrate all of that. That's what he's really good at, is creating this, game within the game and inserting the broadcasters and all that stuff. And I remember we actually finished third that year in the division, actually fourth that year in the division, and had to play Regina, who won the division in the first round. The Broncos that year were loaded for bear. They had so much talent. They had such a strong team. I think of guys like Dale Weiss. Cody Eakin was the 16-year-old on that team. Jordy Wudrick, Zach Smith, who went on to play in the NHL. It was such a good team. And I remember finishing off the upset. Dale Weiss actually scored the empty netter in Game 6 in Swift. That building was electric, and that sealed it, a massive upset. If you can believe that was an upset with those names on that roster, and the crowd going nuts. And if you've been to the games at the iPlex before, all the horns all going. And I remember not even being able to really hear myself in the radio because the fans, whatever it was, 2,900 or whatever it was that night, making so much noise when Dale Weiss put it away after Cody Eakin scored twice to give them the lead. That was a great memory for me. But when it comes to long playoff runs, I didn't really have a lot of that. For me, that first U.S. road swing was a lot of fun to see those buildings and get down there and get the experience of that, because it's on a different level down there, JD. Definitely, those are the memories that come to mind.
Well, and especially because you're going down to even other places besides, not even in the States, but you're going to places that are bigger than the credit union iPlex.
Yeah. Yeah. You're calling games from the Saddle Dome. You're calling games from Northlands Coliseum in Edmonton, and now the big ice surface, Rogers Place there, downtown Edmonton. You go down to Portland, you're calling games out of the Moda Center. That's where the Portland Trailblazers play, the NBA team. Spokane Arena is big and beautiful, and it's just on another level down there. It's a lot of fun, and when you compare it to the iPlex, or what I call it, the Civic Center back in the day, there's a lot of room for growth for sure.
Okay, well, we're going to take one more break, and we're going to come back with your transition from Swift Current to Kamloops when you took over for the reins of the voice of the Blazers. And we'll be right back. We're just going to listen to our word from our local sponsors. Okay, and we're back to the Sask Sports Show. Before the commercial break, we were just talking about Jon's time in Swift Current. Now we're going to move forward as he transitioned from Swift Current to Kamloops, and we're just going to kind of dive into that, and then I can let Jon go for the night. Okay, so like we were saying, that you were the play-by-play for the Swift Current Broncos now, and then you got the job in Kamloops. What was the process of that? Did you get offered the job? Did somebody call you about the job and you interviewed for it? Like, kind of what was that experience like?
So Kirk Fraser was moving on, and it was an opening, and all the the smaller WHL locations, they were all like, "Oh, Kamloops is, the winners are sure better," and it's a franchise that just was taken over by a new ownership group, Tom Ghilardi, and the alumni, the 4 alumni players, and I think it was a popular destination. So my job here is radio station. I work for the radio station, and they do the hiring, but obviously they would need, an I talk about the endorsement. They'd also need the endorsement of the WHL team on that. So I remember putting my name forward. And one thing that really helped me, and you mentioned trying to make a name for yourself, that's why, you're making these contacts, is I took over a radio show called WHL This Week. And it's a league-wide show that the broadcasters, most of the broadcasters picked up and used in their intermissions. And I know Kirk used that in the Blazer intermissions on Radio NL quite a bit. So that was great for me because the station already knew who I was for the fact that they aired that radio show. So that really helped me with the introduction side of things. I remember it was I didn't get a chance to interview in person. I interviewed over the phone, and it was quite a daunting interview. There was 3 others on the conference call with myself: Jim Reynolds, Kelly Moore, who is a former voice of the Winnipeg Jets and the Blazers, for that matter, and longtime sports director here, Rick the Bear Weil. And it was a rapid fire interview process over the phone. And I remember, I was asked a question about this scenario and this scenario, and I remember Bear, who's an old school guy, just wanted to know my thoughts about how the game should be played and what I thought of physical, tough hockey, lunch pail type players, physical fights, all that stuff. And he really wanted to see if we would be compatible in that area. I'm from Saskatchewan. I mean, I mentioned I grew up with the Brookbanks here. I know what that style of hockey's about here. And I think Bear and I clicked in that regard. And the fact that I think that, like I said, I did that WHO radio show. They knew who I was. We did the interview. A couple of days later, they actually called and offered the job. They offered the job actually while I was in Edmonton interviewing for the Expansion Oil Kings job. So I was actually looking to move on. And I remember thinking, like, okay, what happens if I get both offers here? What would I do? What would I take? And lo and behold, the offer for Edmonton never came, and I was able to think long and hard if I was willing to leave Swift Current, JD, because I was really comfortable there, right? Like I could have been comfortable there another 10, 15 years doing that gig, but I just felt it was an opportunity to try something else and give something else a shot.
So, and I know Sean Mullen came in and he replaced you as the new voice of the Broncos. Did you know who at the time who he was?
I didn't meet Sean, and this is when social media, Twitter really wasn't a thing, and we didn't really know all the other broadcasters in the other leagues. Like, sure, we know our broadcasters in the WHL. We have a good feel of these guys, but I wouldn't know any of the BCHL guys or maybe a few of the SJHL guys. So I didn't really know Sean, and I was already gone when they hired Sean. I didn't have a lot of influence in that, and they wanted to go their own way. I'm not sure if I had recommended a person for the job or not, or there was anybody in the radio station that wanted it. I don't think there was. So they gave Sean an opportunity to come from the BCHL to the WHL, where he was, really up until last season he was there too. So yeah, he had a real good run there with the Broncos as well, including, that WHL title, which he'll always have for sure.
Well, I know I've talked to him, and I just didn't know if you guys crossed paths before him coming and taking over the job, taking your old job.
A couple emails back and forth just to kind of, get the lay of the land there. He was also, I believe, in the running for the Kamloops job as well. I think there was a short list that he was on, so he was in the mix already, and had gone through the interview process actually in person here in Kamloops. So when I got this job, then most of those applicants just rushed over to the Swift Current job to see if they could pick up that vacant spot, and that's kind of the way it works here. A lot of times, it's the way it works in the coaching ranks. It's the way it kind of works in the broadcasting ranks too.
So how was the transition from Swift Current to Kamloops? Like how did you feel getting offered the job? And then also, how were the first couple seasons in Kamloops?
Yeah, for the job wise, when you're in Swift Current, you work at the radio station, you do it all. I remember getting off the bus at 3 a.m. and then going in to do the sportscast for the morning run, the 6 a.m. sportscast here, as my dog wants me to throw his toy here. He's bugging me right now. But when I got to Kamloops, I was like, wait a minute. You don't want me to do all this? You don't want me to work 16-hour days and all this stuff? They're like, no, you call the game. You get the day off of the game, and if you're on the road, you get the day off afterwards. Don't worry about it. We'll work all your days off into it. And I'm used to going 6-7 days a week in Swift Current, and all of a sudden I'm like, no, 5 days a week. That's all you're going to do. And I was just like, wow, like, is this like a retirement job? Like, I was like, I just never knew it existed like this. And I'm never afraid of extra work and long trips and game calling in Saskatchewan. So I prepared myself to work hard, and I kind of got to Kamloops, and they gave me all this time to sort of rest and recuperate and recover. And you mentioned transition. One of the biggest differences is that the miles out here in this conference are way harder than the miles in Saskatchewan. Like here you're going over mountain passes, twists and turns, and rumble strips in the highway, and you're always sort of moving around the bus, into the window, into the seat, into the aisle. Where Saskatchewan, just straight, right? And the miles are just so much harder out in BC for sure. Well,
and then it's just like going up to PG, and I've talked to boys out here that have had to, make the trip from, PA or, any boys from Saskatchewan having to go out there, and they're like, I wish Prince George just never existed because, having to make that trek up there, they just never liked it.
Yeah, and you know what? It's tough. At minor hockey levels, you'd probably leave at 9 a.m., play the game, and then head right home right away. And the WHL doesn't do that. Like if we're going up to Prince George, we'd play 2 games, so we'd play Friday and Saturday night. We would leave Thursday, so we'd get into PG around 5 or 6 o'clock, have a team meal, go to the rink that next morning, and get the game day skate in. I could set up my broadcast booth. There was never real any like, oh my God, the travel, we got to go back and forth in one day. So that's luxuries of the WHL, and having the budget to do that is to get there early, spend 3 nights instead of just one, play a doubleheader, and then come back.
Yeah. And what, do you have all your prep? Like, take me kind of through, you're going on the road, and I realize going on the big road trip's different, but just going up to Prince George, kind of take me through your pregame routine with getting all your prep ready for the game and whatnot.
Yeah, I'll do my game prep, the rosters, write out the rosters, and find probably 20, 25 little tidbits of the 2 teams or something. I'll have recall. They'll be on a sheet of paper I can recall easily in front of me in my broadcast book. And I'll do that either the night before or I'll do that game day. Usually on the road, game day, you got a long day between, really you got to be at the rink at 5 o'clock. So you don't have a lot of duties until it's time to drop the puck. So I'll take the time to maybe after breakfast, sit down and crank out my prep and do my voicers that I send back to the radio station and make sure they're all taken care of for the sportscast back there. And just get ready. And then when you get to the rink, like I said, if I could set up the broadcast gear early, that takes a load off my mind and a load off of, that feeling of making sure everything's ready to go. I'll go down, I'll talk to both coaches, I'll talk to a player or two, get that ready for the pregame show. I'll make sure all my intermission bases are covered so I have guests or something taped and ready to go for the intermission. And then if I have everything in place, all I have to do from that point is just call the game itself. And that's really the easy part. Getting to that point is the difficult part.
Well, and I know it's it's no different than me doing the show or me calling some games. The easy part, the fun part for me is talking to you, but finding information, having questions ready to go, and having little tidbits for games is the prep. That's the hard part. People are like, oh, I can just call a hockey game.
Completely. And the fact that you get an opportunity to host a show like this is just great. It's great training ground, and it's something that you'll look back on and be like, boy, that was a great opportunity to sit down and talk to some people that are in the game, and also get my own crack as far as trying to develop your own style.
Yeah, no, it'll come. I'm COVID's making it a little bit more difficult, but we're getting through it.
Yeah, it's a grind, man. That's for sure. We've never seen anything like this, and hopefully we never see it again.
No, I don't want to. But so you've been in Kamloops for what, 10 years? Going on 10 years?
10 years in the fall. So 10 years, 10 seasons, and this would have been season number 11 here, but we're just still, as you know, in the waiting game there. But yeah, it's been 10 years. Hard to believe. 10 years flew by in this city compared to 10 years in Swift Current. I was there, I think, in Swift for 12 in total, 12 or 13. But yeah, it just flew by here, and I can't believe it's been 10 years already.
What I know about so you came in 2010. Was that you came over in 2010? 2012, I can't remember if it was the 2011, 2012, 2013 season. Kamloops had that team that went to the Western Conference back-to-back seasons with Brennan Renford and Colin Smith and JC LaPon. Can't remember who you had in goal. I think it was, what's his name?
Well, it was Cole Cheveldave 1 year. Cam Lanigan was the other half of that. And there was another goalie before Cole. But that was, you got the gist of it there. You mentioned LaPon, and Timmy Bozon was a great import from Switzerland. And, that team was loaded to go. It had great goaltending, great defense, was tough, and could score goals. This team could score, and it was a lot of fun.
Well, take me through that Western Conference semifinal game that they came back and ended up winning 7-6. What was your blood pressure like that night?
We just call that Game 6, JD. I don't know. Were you in the building that night, or?
I think so.
Think so. Hey, we only had, truth be told, there was only 4,500 in the building that night, but like 20,000 people say they were there. The way it went down. So maybe you're one of the 15,000 that just say you were there and you weren't. But that was an incredible night. But it wasn't so much that game. I mean, that game was big, JD. The 7-6 game where you come back from 5-2 down. But it was the process, the build up to that game. Remember, this series was 3-0 Portland at one point, 3-0. Blazers found a way to come back in Game 5. They were down 4-0 in Game 4, I should say. They were down 4-0. Like, bring out the brooms. The series is over. They found a way to win that game, and that meant they had to go back on the road. And they won like 7-3 in Portland. Right back on the bus, right back to Kamloops for a Game 6. They were down 5-2 in the third and did it again and blew the lid off that place in that wild. If you just ever want to go on YouTube and search Kamloops Blazers Game 6, the whole highlights are there. And it was an incredible moment to force a Game 7. That was the very next night in Portland. So it was back on the bus again, back across the border, just chasing these two buses, kind of passing each other through the night to race back for a Game 7. It was a lot of fun. And that was definitely my most memorable game. If you want to look it up, Game 6, Kamloops, it's all there. It was just a crazy, wild night.
Well, with that was the Portland team that was just loaded too. Like they had that's when Seth Jones was on their team, that big defenseman. And I remember seeing him. I don't know if I was at that game. I could have been, but I remember seeing Seth Jones play live in that playoff series. And that was I can't remember who they had on their team. I think they might have had. I don't think it was. I can't remember.
Well, some of the big names, like Tyler Wotherspoon and Matt Carruth in goal, and of course, Ty Ratty was the catalyst goal scorer. That was a really good team, and Portland was good back-to-back years. Their team, the second year after the Game 6, the next season, 2013 in the playoffs when they met in the Western Conference Final. The Blazers they swept, they beat Victoria, swept Kelowna, and then played Portland in the Western Conference Final that year. Lost in 5 that year, but yeah, Portland had some really good teams in those seasons for sure.
Okay, now I'm gonna ask you a heart-wrenching question. Would you take that game against Portland and compare it to the one against the tiebreaker against Kelowna?
Oh.
Which one do you think was your, like, obviously both of them were great, but as a all-time moment, because I don't think I've ever heard you that excited. Because I was listening to the game on the radio and you were just like, whew.
Which one, the tiebreaker or the game 6?
No, the tie. Well, I was listening to the tiebreaker on the radio. Sorry.
Oh, yeah. Oh, that's a great question. Two different things, but the biggest thing about those games, JD, and I talked about that earlier in this, was the emotional investment of playing a rival, right? Like Kelowna Kamloops is always going to be the rivalry, right? And the fact that what the Blazers had to do, and again, it wasn't so much, and I'll say this again, game 6, I talked about the lead up to make game 6 special. The lead up to make the tiebreaker was special too, right? You had to come back. 7 or 8 things in a row had to happen for the Blazers to get to that tiebreaker spot. Like, you run the odds on it, and it's really probably 1,000 to 1 just to get to the tiebreaker game, because you need to win. Kelowna needs to lose. You need to beat Kelowna in Kelowna and then beat them the next night. And even the game 7 or game 68 of the regular season, the Blazers needed at least a point in that game, and Connor Zary had to score with 20 seconds left to tie Prince George in Kamloops just to get the game to overtime to continue the Cinderella run of trying to track down that final playoff spot. And you mentioned what's bigger. Okay, one was a game 6 of a playoff series. One was a game to decide who gets the last playoff spot in the Western Conference, who gets 8th and who's 9th. And so if you put it in perspective that way, it's no contest. But the overall emotional level of it, JD, that's tough, because I know the WHL opened that up to a free webcast night. There was a huge audience that night. I knew that. I knew that the whole league was watching, and I was like, let's give them a show. And good thing is, the Blazers gave him a show, and those 2 giveaways by Roman Bazran behind the net, and some of the craziest moments in a wild atmosphere, sold out at the Sandman Center. You can't beat that. That's what it's all about right there.
Well, and even listening to that on the radio, like, I was in Medicine Hat at the time, and I had the luxury of listening to Bob Ridley every night. And you talk about a guy that's an idol, man. Listening to him, oh gosh,
yeah.
He had 3,600 some games he's done, over 3,600.
Unbelievable, yeah.
But anyways, listening to you on that radio, I don't think I've watched the highlight on the WHL channel after that at the website, and just listening to you that night, I was fangirling it up. I was like listening, and I was excited as everybody else in Kamloops for that game, because they both had the exact same record. I think they went in there 28-32 and 1-4 or something. I can't remember the exact numbers, but I think one team out of the BC division entered the playoffs that year with a winning record, and I think that was first place, the Vancouver Giants.
Yeah. And then Victoria would have been, I think, a couple games over 500 as well.
Oh, okay.
Who the Blazers would have played in that first round series. It was different, right? That was when they changed the format to top 3 in the division, make it, and then there's 2 wild card berths, right? So you're competing for that wild card berth, and there was just so much on the line that night. And you mentioned, like, I knew the entire league was watching. I got a lot of texts from some of my colleagues that meant a lot, that said, like, man, like, you had me, man. Like, that was that was just a fantastic broadcast, and kudos to the guys, the players, for pulling that out. I mean, that was unbelievable to nail that playoff spot down after being so far out of it there, really in February. Yeah,
and I know, I'm pretty sure my dad was at the game too, and he was telling me about it, and I was like, I heard it all, don't worry. And I don't think I've seen Kamloops that excited about the Blazers in a very long time.
Well, it's Kelowna, right? Like, it's always like, what's the force behind the force here, right? And it's the I always use this analogy here. Prince George thinks that Kamloops is their rival. Kamloops thinks that Kelowna is their rival, and Kelowna is just too cool for everybody. So that's kind of the way it goes sometimes, right? But with that said, that rivalry had been pretty lopsided for years. Kelowna had their way. Great teams there. Memorial Cup bound, 4 times in the last decade. They won the one on home ice. So Blazers have finally sort of tipped the scales in their favor. And even this past season, after the tiebreaker game, I think the Blazers won, 9 of 10 head-to-head games or something. So it was just something that's really, 2 ships passing in the night here recently in that rivalry. But it's going to get good again for sure, no doubt about it.
Well, and you even look at Vancouver too. They didn't beat Vancouver once 2 years ago, and then they ended up, I think, maybe the same thing. Vancouver may have beat them once on a Sunday afternoon in Vancouver, maybe in Langley. I think that was the only time. Yeah. Maybe.
I think the Blazers had won the first 4 meetings, and there was the game too where Dylan Garand got hurt late in the season. They won that game, and Vancouver was coming on. Like, they were coming on late in that division before the Blazers were able to sort of salt that away. But yeah, it's junior hockey, right? That's the great thing about junior hockey is there's turnover. If you're bad, you get good. If you're good, you lose top players, and it's cyclical, and that's what makes it so exciting for everybody.
Well, to finish her off, John, I know you've kind of touched on it a little bit, but what would you say to young, inspiring sports broadcasters that want to get into this field? Not including me, but everybody else, that young guys that probably have come up to you and been like, hey, what do I have to do this? Yeah,
well, that's, I think 2 people on the screen right now could be a good example of what you got to do. And I can only go off the experience that worked for me. And that was, if you're given an opportunity to do something, if you have to volunteer to do it, do it. Do as much as you can. Never say no to anything. Make contacts. Like I said, I was knocking on that WHL visitor door while I was in school to say, hey, hi, Les Lazaruk, I'm Jon Keen. I never was afraid to approach somebody. I got my foot in the door and just made sure that if I got my foot in the door, I could kick it open later. But I never said no to an opportunity. I did a ton of games in college and worked my way up to where I'm at now. And looking back, I probably would have said, boy, you were foolish, but it definitely helped out. And like I said, you're doing the right thing. You got the sports show here. Last year when you came to me, I said, do as many of these midget games you can and junior B games, and you've done it. So that's a big step to, you got to be passionate about it. And you can find out if you want to get up Sunday morning and do a game at 9 a.m. And just for the volunteer love of the game, that's a good start. You never say no, and make sure that you take advantage of an opportunity if it's given to you.
Well, I appreciate, like I said before, everything that you've done for me. And there's actually one thing I wanted to tell you before we conclude the show, is I wanted to congratulate you on your 1,000th game. I know it was 3 years ago, but I just wanted to say congratulations. I know that's probably a big milestone for you, especially calling games in the WHL. Like I said, you've been you're a friend of mine, and you're somebody that I look up to, somebody I want to, be like in the future. And obviously everybody's going to have their own goal calls, but I'll always remember yours.
Yeah, well, hey, it's tough to hear those words, but thanks, on the 1,000 games, and that was a special night. And I remember the radio station actually talked to some of my former colleagues, interviewed them. I didn't know, and then they played little things in the commercial break, congratulating me. I thought that was awesome. Don Hay, saying that in the commercial break that stuff was really cool. But yeah, thank you. And hey, you'll always have an ally in me. And if you can have a guy going to bat for you for a job, look me up. I can do that here for you. So that's important to have too for young guys, is to have some guys on your side. That's important.
Well, I appreciate the taking the time to jump on the show with me. I know we've been talking here for a while and we got a lot out there, but I just wanted to say thank you. So that concludes our show here for the Sask Sports Show. I hope you guys tune in on Thursday night. This will for every Thursday night at 7 o'clock local time for the Sask Sports Show. So John, thank you again.
Thanks, JD. Keep plugging along there, and stay winning there in Toontown. Okay.
I will. Have a good night, and I'll talk to you later.